All right, well, today is February 9th, which means it is International SCN8A Awareness Day. And this is our 5th annual Awareness Day. And of course, that means it's Shay, Emma Hammer's birthday. She would have been 25 today. And we just are so grateful that Michael has stuck around and been in this community and continues to push things forward. And, you know, we're also really grateful, obviously, for people like you, Carolyn, and your team at Neurocrine that are working so hard to find answers for our kids and find treatments that will hopefully really get at the root of the challenges. You know, so many of us use 3 and 4 and 5 different anti-seizure medications and still are struggling. So, you know, we all are very hopeful for the compound that you've got clinical trials starting with soon. And we're just really grateful that you are here with us and are willing to kind of keep the community updated about what you're up to and where things are. So do you want to say anything before we get started, Carolyn? Carolyn McMicken is the Director of Clinical Development at Neurocrine, and she's got a statement that we'll play, and then we'll be taking some questions. So anything you want to say before we roll the video?
I'm sure I'll say it again on the video. I'm just really honored to be here and look forward to answering some more questions when we finish with the recorded statement. And hopefully the technology cooperates today.
Just disappeared. Okay, it came back.
Hello, SCN8A community. On behalf of Neurocrine Biosciences, I'm honored to join with you today in raising awareness of SCN8A. And while we acknowledge the devastating impacts of the disease, we also celebrate this dedicated community and we share your urgency in finding new treatments. So today I'd like to share some updates relating to our SCN8A program at Neurocrine. As many of you know, Neurocrine Biosciences has an ongoing collaboration with Xenon Pharmaceuticals to develop new treatments for epilepsy, including NBI 921352, previously known as XEN901. This is a clinical stage selective NaV 1.6 sodium channel inhibitor with potential in SCN8A, developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, or SCN8A DEE. Unlike sodium channel inhibitors that block multiple ion channels, NBI 921352 specifically targets the voltage-gated sodium channel referred to as NaV 1.6. The majority of mutations in the SCN8A gene that result in SCN8A DEE also result in a gain of function in NaV 1.6, which can result in epileptic seizures. We believe this precision approach may result in improved tolerability and efficacy for the treatment of SCN8A DEE. Recently, we met with the FDA regarding our investigational new drug, or IND, application in support of initiating a phase 2 clinical trial in SCN8A DEE patients. The development team asked me to share with you that during our conversations with the FDA, the agency acknowledged the interactions with the SCN8A advocacy community, and they were well informed of the unmet need in SCN8A. Your stories were heard, and they made an impact. Based on the FDA feedback, we are working to initiate a clinical trial, a phase 2 clinical trial in adolescent and young adult patients aged 12 to 21 years old with SCN8A DEE later this year, roughly in the 3rd quarter. In addition, We're generating additional non-clinical data requested by the FDA to support enrollment of children 2 to 11 years old. Once the FDA is satisfied with the additional non-clinical information, we will amend the study to include younger children with SCN8A DEE. I know that many of you have questions about the details of the study. When will it start? How many patients? Where will the trial site locations be? Inclusion, exclusion criteria? And those answers will be coming over the next 6 to 8 months as we finalize the protocol and obtain necessary regulatory approvals needed to open the study. Once the study is open, we will be able to share more about the protocol, and the course of the study will be posted on clinicaltrials.gov. In addition to studying NBI 921352 and SCN8A DEE, Neurocrine is also developing NBI 921352 for the treatment of adult focal onset epilepsy and expects to initiate a phase 2 clinical trial this year. For more information about our epilepsy development programs, we have developed an epilepsy disease state fact sheet that provides a summary of our epilepsy portfolio. We are also proud to highlight our sponsorship of the Invitae Behind the Seizure program in the US and Canada. This program provides free access to comprehensive testing for epilepsy-related genetic variations in any child under the age of 8 with unprovoked seizures. Thank you for inviting Neurocrine to join you today. We honor your experience, and we are committed to working with you to develop better treatments for SCN8A DEE. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carolyn. That was a comprehensive message. I think we have a lot, you've got a lot going on. We're so thrilled that you've got a more comprehensive epilepsy program and are really kind of entering that space. And we're really glad to have you here today with us. So, you know, there's a lot of questions in the community. You addressed to some of them there and said, you know, we're not going to know for a while. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about kind of how the clinical trial moves forward at this point in terms of how things get planned, the sites and all of that. What is your process for figuring that out?
So, you know, we're looking at many different options. We're getting feedback from the community, from people like you, Gabi, as well as other individuals who are supportive of SCN8A. We really want to understand who the best providers are, and we look at the different potential sites to see if they have the right patients, if they have the right infrastructure in place, if they're following the most up-to-date protocols. I mean, I know that some questions have come in around COVID, and we're very mindful of making sure that the sites are following whatever the latest CDC guidance is. So we're taking into account, there's just a lot going on to make sure that we are choosing the most appropriate study site locations.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of us who are on our side, right, where families were really anxious to, you know, to see things come together, and you know, a lot of us are like, how do I sign up? How do I sign up? Right. But the process is very, what is the word? Like complex, right? And it's not like, you know, you just say, okay, we'll use these doctors and sign everybody up. And there's a lot of work that goes into, I mean, how big is your clinical development team that works on this phase?
Oh my. Well, just for the epilepsy program internally, I know we've got at least a dozen people working on it. And then of course we have many partners that are outside of Neurocrine that are helping with different aspects of getting ready for a study like this.
Excellent. Yeah. So it's very complex. And if people have, questions about clinical trials. Carolyn was generous enough to be on one of our Deep Connections webinars that kind of outlines the process for how those work. So we'll share those to let folks know kind of more about the details of the process. So we've got a dad here, Luca. He said, did the FDA address the age range of 12 to 21 that was selected? So many of our kids are younger, and for many, controlling seizures at a younger age might help with development. And I know this is something we've discussed, but
Yeah.
the wider community, yeah.
Yeah, and I know in the program I did in the fall, the big thing is we really have to balance out the safety, and in considering that this is a new compound that has never been tested before in kids. So really, they felt that we could move forward. We have everything we need to move forward with that 12 to 21 age group. And we are doing everything we can to make sure we have the required data so that as soon as possible, the FDA can clear us to open it up to the younger age groups.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Q3, so you're thinking that kind of basically later this year is when you'll be starting with the 12 to 21 age range, and then hopefully soon after followed by the 2 to 11. How many kids do you anticipate enrolling, or young adults in the clinical trials at this stage?
So we're currently in the process of updating the study protocol, and I know everybody wants to know how many and will my child be able to participate. So we have to kind of sit tight. That information will be coming. Certainly, we have a broader age range to look at. So we will be deciding accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Still in the works. I think you'll probably hear that a lot today, that we're not there yet. We don't have answers yet, but we just all have to be patient, because this takes time to do it right. And we know that you all are experts in doing this and moving through the stages and getting all the approvals. And so, we're grateful. We're impatient, but we understand why. So we've got a question here from Miriam. How do you plan to accommodate current treatments? Will this be an add-on protocol?
So I can address that question generally, again, because I don't have the protocol finalized, but very generally speaking, in clinical trials, not just with kids, but in general with epilepsy, typically you wouldn't ask anybody to be without any other background medication, especially since the new drug you haven't tested yet. So typically there are, with some exclusions, other medications are allowed to continue as long as they're stable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's also some questions in the community about how do clinical trials continue in the midst of COVID? And that's something that you all are discussing and navigating with the rest of the world right now. Do you have any insights that you want to share about how that might change things?
Sure. The first, I think I mentioned to you in talking earlier, a big concern is we want to make sure that when we do choose sites that they are following, all of the current CDC guidelines, and hopefully your provider is doing that. But we are sensitive to the challenges that this presents for anybody, let alone somebody with a child who has a condition like SCN8A DEE.
Mm-hmm.
So we are working not just internally to try and problem solve and figure out what's the safest way to gather the data needed. There's also kind of collaborations outside of just our virtual walls at Neurocrine, and talking with other study sites as well as other pharmaceutical companies, the NIH and the FDA, about how can we mitigate the challenges that are presented. And it's evolved. Last year there were trials going on that people had to quickly either stop doing them or figure out how to continue in the midst of COVID. And now we're looking at starting trials, knowing that there's still this concern in the background. So we are committed to figuring out the safest and most appropriate way to conduct the trials, and with consideration of the challenges.
Yeah, no, that's great. We're glad that you're not deterred by, all of the walls that are coming up with COVID. We have a question about how long could it take moving from clinical trials to commercialization of a new drug? And I know another parent had asked, would you consider applying for, emergency authorization to get this into the hands of patients if it seems like it's working as well as we hope it will?
Yeah, and that's something I can't comment too much on it, because our regulatory team is working with the FDA, and we have to move through the process and just work through it. So I can commit to giving periodic updates and let you know that we are actively pursuing and hoping that we can find a new treatment as quickly and effectively as possible.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, I think that keeping us apprised as things progress is fantastic. We really appreciate you guys being willing to have us along on the journey with you. And I think that, for some of these answers, it might just have to be kind of, what's typically done. Like, there was a question about whether do kids have to stay in the hospital when they start this med? How often do they need to be seen? And I think those are questions that are not answerable today, but maybe, and if they are, feel free, but if not, maybe tell us a little bit about kind of what that typically looks like in terms of the burden of visits for families in a clinical trial.
Yeah, and every clinical trial is different. And then that's something, certainly when I would encourage families, when you're meeting with your healthcare provider, to talk about your interest and what's available, what they think might be appropriate. Some trials are much more involved than others. Some include an intervention like a medication or a certain treatment. Others are really just trying to observe and provide the best care possible. And so some, have a higher number of visits than others. Some are longer than others. The minimum you typically see of any trial in epilepsy would be in the 12-week range. Some of them are much longer. And then there's typically kind of a longer observation period where the patient can get the medication. So there aren't any easy answers to this. And again, I encourage families, you can look on clinicaltrials.gov and, even if it's not SCN8A, because there aren't really many, if any, trials open right now in that, you can look at other kind of epilepsy conditions in children and see what the typical study design looks like and get some ideas of what you might expect. And again, talk to the doctor about that. Certainly, the question about whether you have to stay in the hospital to get the treatment. Again, that's very specific to what it is that you're trying to learn about a medication. You don't often see inpatient type of studies for a medication that a person would take by mouth, but that's not a blanket. It's not always going to be the case.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think, so many of our children are very severely affected, as you know. I mean, you guys have a lot of insight into this community and the impacts that SCN8A has on our lives and our children. And I am very excited about the idea that this is a targeted treatment. This is the first drug that is really looking at getting at the root of the issue in SCN8A, as opposed to being a general anti-seizure drug that just tries to tackle the seizures. Do you have, early indications show that this drug will likely help with things beyond seizures, beyond, some of the comorbidities that come along with SCN8A. Do you have a sense of what that might look like, or what outcome measures might be used to define success?
Sure. So, we're certainly going to be looking at the seizure outcomes with treating a patient with a sodium channel inhibitor, but we were also exploring a number of other outcomes. So, you know, spanning the cognitive, the behavioral, you know, what the overall picture is, what we call a global clinical impression. And then, you know, hopefully we'll get really good information about some of those other things, because I know that the seizure isn't always, you know, just getting rid of the seizures if it comes with other, you know, kind of cost benefit, that we have to weigh that as well. So we definitely want to understand more than just that.
Yeah, and as the theme for International Epilepsy or Epilepsy Awareness Day yesterday was, it's more than seizures, right? So that certainly applies for our community. Maybe could you talk a little bit about, and I welcome there's a lot of our regional coordinators here and other families. If you have other questions, feel free to keep putting them in the chat or raise your hand. We'll be happy to keep getting to those. So is this going to be the kind of clinical trial where there's a placebo? Are you able to share whether that's likely to happen?
So I will ask everybody to sit tight as we finalize the protocol.
Yep, we'll get there. All right. And then obviously I think, you know, a lot of our children are not eating by mouth, have swallowing issues. So I know that you guys are also looking at different formulations, right? So that you don't have to be somebody that takes a pill by mouth to be able to get this compound. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in order to do a trial, make it appropriate for this patient population, a pediatric appropriate formulation has been developed. So it can be mixed with soft foods or liquid prior to dosing.
And can be given via GJ tubes and all of that. Yeah. All right. So that will not exclude anyone. So I guess there's a question here that's a challenge. If you know, how do you really measure success or the impact of your compound in particular when kids might be on other drugs at the same time, particularly sodium channel blockers?
So, you know, there's different types of study designs that you can use when you conduct a clinical trial. That's often the reason, if you talk about what you call a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, then that concept of something being randomized is that you would expect there to be a balance. So if you have a placebo group and an active treatment group, then with that randomization, roughly the same number of people that end up in one group versus the other have the same background treatments on average. And then you measure versus one another and see what the incremental benefit might be of whatever the new treatment is. You know, and then you can also, depending on, it's harder with smaller studies, and you know, there's challenges with rare pediatric conditions. But you know, a big thing that where I've just moved from in medical affairs, there's lots of kind of what they call post analyses that look at these smaller subgroups of, you know, did people in this age group do better, or what are some of the things that contribute to somebody really having a great response versus not a great response.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. I just learned something new there, so that's great. I mean, I think that's comforting to hear. I think a lot of people are scared at the idea of, you know, dropping all the meds that may be sort of working. You know, a lot of us don't know what would happen if we got rid of 2 or 3 of the meds that our kids are on, because, you know, it's hard to tell what's doing what, but that makes sense about how things are, you know, assessed with the similar background, right? So it's having everybody kind of be at the same starting point, roughly.
Yeah, and I mean, in the epilepsy world, there's been a lot of research into, looking at historical placebos, and then also looking at, whether it's safe or not to, whether you should take away a medication or add one on. And certainly there's a lot of resources, maybe through the Epilepsy Study Consortium, or that you can find out more about that. Because I know Jackie French has done a lot of research in that area, maybe in adults. I don't know as much in kids, but
Right.
I think from what they studied, always try to add on first.
Right. No, that's great. And we can find some of that work that Jackie French has done and post it a little later today so people can explore that. We're getting close to time here. So if anybody has any final questions, feel free to throw them in here. And again, a virtual follow-up's been something that you've considered as part of your COVID times clinical trial kind of protocols.
We're looking at all types of options, including, when it would be appropriate to offer a virtual follow-up, or, even if there's an unanticipated situation where somebody was willing to come in, but they have to quarantine. So what do you do? So we're definitely looking at all of those things.
Yeah, and I know that, like, for example, if blood work is done, you don't necessarily, in some cases, have to travel out of state to your main site. So I know you guys are taking into consideration all of the ways to make this as easy as possible for our families, because for a lot of us, it's not so easy to even get out the door.
Yeah, imagine.
Yeah, so.
Especially not in the Northeast lately.
Right. I know, my goodness, really getting snowed in up there. So, okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and we'll look forward to having you back in the future when you have updates, when you have more answers to some of these questions we keep throwing at you. And, yeah, we appreciate that you are willing to come on and even just say that. I know somebody might think, oh, what's the point? We don't know. But I think it's so helpful for our community to hear that what's in progress and what's coming down the line. And we're so grateful for you to kind of keeping us abreast of what's going on and engaged. So I know that families are really grateful that you set aside this time. And, for our 5th International SCN8A Awareness Day. And for me personally, I have so much hope going into 2021. And, frankly, 5 years ago, we were in a very different place. So thank you so much for all that you are doing. We're really grateful for Neurocrine's commitment to the SCN8A community, and for kind of taking the time to understand who we are, where we're coming from, and what's critical for our families. So we thank you, and you can hopefully take thanks back to everybody at Neurocrine for us, and we're sending big purple hearts that way.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, and I, definitely we will keep in touch, and happy to continue providing updates. And, I really appreciate joining with the community. And like I said in my statement, definitely share in that sense of urgency and the hope that we can find better treatments.
Yeah. There's a lot of work to be done, but we're really excited for where we're headed. So thank you so much. And for anybody who doesn't know, not only is this week International Epilepsy Awareness, International SCN8A Awareness Day, it's also SAP, Seizure Action Plan Awareness Week. So we'll be having a webinar on Thursday about that. We invite people to come and join us for that, to talk about the importance of seizure action plans. And have a great day. Have a purple day. I hope you all continue to have hope like I do for where we're headed. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.